A lot of the problems that we're going to look at today are from this book, which is a great resource if you need practice problems. It is enormous, like this thick, and yay, yeah, it's divided up by topics. So if you say don't like rates, there's a whole chapter on rate problems. Taylor, we post these on YouTube, so you could also go on our YouTube channel and like go back through and find some of the quant ones that we've done in the last year, because there is a lot of quant stuff on there, and it'll be labeled with what the topics are. But today's topic, we're going to talk about inference questions, which are by far, I think, the hardest type of reading prompt question for the most people. And I think the big reason for that is the GRE uses the word infer, but they don't really mean infer in the way that we think about infer. So that's what I want to look at today. I want to look at this one type of reading comp question that's super tricky. And then I want to talk about why it's tricky, how we can outsmart it, and discuss a process for dealing with this type of question. Oh, nice. We've had a few more folks come in. Hello. Hey, Maggie. Hey, Emily. Good to have you here. We're doing some discussion in the chat, so I'll just say hi again in the chat so everyone can find it. If you're going to chat in, chat to all panelists and attendees if you feel comfortable with that, so your classmates can see the cool things you have to say in tonight's session. Hey, Vera. Welcome. So to start, is anyone here new to GRE? Like you're just getting started on this process of thinking about this test? No one's new. Oh, fun. All right. So I do want to recap for a moment what is in reading comp, but I'll go quickly because it seems like folks are familiar with the test. And then we're going to hone in on this one specific type of reading comp question. So here's your verbal section, your 20 problems in 30 minutes. So we're moving really fast. And you're going to get the three big formats: reading comp, text completion, and sentence equivalence in roughly the same order in every reading comp section. So you can expect always the text completion first. That's one of the two types of vocab questions. Then you're going to get the reading comp, then the other type of vocab question, sentence equivalence here. So those ones in yellow are vocab, and then reading kind of sandwiched in there. So reading comp, half the section. Now, I would recommend, on average, spending about 2 minutes on the average reading comp question. We're going to work roughly with that time tonight when we do some time problems. But it's a little complicated because this time factors in the time we have to spend reading the passage. So when you're thinking about timing yourself in reading comp to practice, think about 2 minutes per question on average for a passage. So if a passage had 3 questions, you would then say, okay, I have 6 minutes to read and do the questions. So it's often a sort of back and forth. How much time do we spend reading the passage versus how much time do we spend on the questions? And we can talk a little bit about that as we go through tonight. All right. So within that world of reading comp, within that half of each verbal section that is reading comp, we're going to see 3 different types of things. First off, we're going to see a long passage. You're going to see at least one. And that long passage is going to have 4 to 5 questions associated with it. You're probably going to have to scroll up and down. So as soon as you see something like questions 15 to 25 to 20, only 20 questions, questions 15 to 20 are based on this passage, then you know it's a long passage, and you'll get 1, maybe 2 of those on the test as the whole. Short passages, you're going to see 2 different things. So these are passages, I'll show you some examples in a second, but like maybe 1 long paragraph or 2 short paragraphs. You're going to see some short passages that ask you about content. And then you're going to see some short passages that ask you about logic. And today we're actually going to look at both content and logic passages, because both types of these passages have a type of question that is an inference question associated with them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this distinction between the content-based reading and the logic-based reading, because we're going to see 2 slightly different types of passages today. So this is what you'd see on a long passage like this, really long, have to scroll, multiple questions. This would be a short passage. And this is an example of a content passage where it's very similar to the types of content we get in the long passages. It's going to be, you know, humanities, sciences, social sciences, that kind of academic stuff. And we're going to get a bunch of different types of questions associated with them. Main idea, detail, and inference. And today we're specifically just going to hone in on these inference. Now, there's another type of short passage, the logic-based passage like this, and you'll notice these are very, very short passages, and they just have one question. And once we see that short passage, one question, we're like, okay, we're dealing with logic. And this is often these questions that look like this, you know, what undermines the argument, what strengthens the conclusion. And then there is one type of those that has to deal with inference. So, inference questions. These are the reading questions that use language like this. Suggest, imply, infer. When I say, if I just say like, okay, you can infer that something, something, something. What does infer mean if I just use it in casual conversation? Like, how would you guys define what infer means? Give us something in the chat. What does it mean to infer something? Okay, if I said this, Sally's hair is wet. Yeah, thank you, Aviv. I love it. That is a great definition of how we use infer casually in everyday life to make an educated guess. So, all right. If I tell you Sally's hair is wet, what could you then infer? Yeah, cool. She was out in the rain. She just washed it. She showered. Awesome. In real life, in our world, these are all things that we could reasonably infer from that, using Abib's definition that we all use in casual conversation to make an educated guess. But that is not how the GRE uses infer. The GRE uses infer to mean something very different. When you see this language, suggest, imply, infer, what the GRE means and what they want you to do is using, if this is the fact you know, what else has to be true? I'm so sorry, I got a new computer and my typing on it is not great. That's why I keep making so many weird typos. So in GRE land, it's like, okay, if this fact or these facts in the passage, all you know, what else has to be true? Our answer choice has to be something that is, our correct inference has to be something that's provable according to the passage. So coming back to our example, Sally's hair is wet. In GRE terms, you can infer that what? We're thinking about not our everyday casual definition of GRE, but really literal, this is all I know, what else has to be true? Any inferences we could get than that? Would that have to be true, babe? Like if her hair is wet, would her hands say have to be wet too? It's an interesting example, actually. Yeah, Laura, that's it. Her hair is not dry. In the GRE world, that's all I could infer. Abib, your example was super interesting because it's something the GRE often does. It makes inferences that seem reasonable like that and seem like just a slight extension of the facts we have, but they go a little bit beyond what we know for certain with the facts we have. Yeah, fair. That's good. That's very close. Although then you could kind of argue with that a little, like maybe she's swimming, or like, does she need a towel right now, or does she need a towel later? Uh, but I like it. That's a clever one. All right. So let's try it. This is a weird thing. It's sometimes a counterintuitive thing. So before we get to full questions, I want to do a couple warm-ups. So I'm going to give you a statement, and then I want you to chat me the answer that is a GRE allowable inference. Cool. I'm getting some votes for E. Looks like we have a strong consensus for E. I like it. And that is correct. If my puppy is always staring at me, right now is part of always, I know that statement E is true. And it's similar to a sort of passage to correct answer relationship in an inference passage, and that it doesn't look exactly the same as the statement we're given. It is rephrased or changed up, but it's still 100% true. Whereas A or B, those are kind of our more real world inferences. Like if we were just casually talking, those could be, you know, when my dog stares at me, those are things I infer, but they aren't those things that I absolutely know for sure are true. All right, let's try another one that's just a little bit trickier, but similar kind of example. Here you go. Same thing. When you're ready, chat me which of these has to be true. All right, we've got this one. This one's trickier, and I'm seeing some divergent answers here. So let's go through them, and I want to give you guys a test to apply to say, is this a GRE legal inference? Am I 100% certain this is true? Like, would I bet on this being true? Beyond shadow of a doubt. So pay more shoes cost $76. Joe has enough money to buy the shoes. Does Joe have $80? Are you 100% certain that $80 is the money Joe has? What do you guys think? Yeah, yep, that's a great point, Vicky. Vicky said, you know, he could have $79. Yeah. So A is our could be true, seems reasonable, but not 100%. And you're going to see this trap show up all the time in inference questions. So we can get rid of A. If Joe can buy the shoes, does he 100% definitely have $1 at least? Yeah. Yep. If he has 76 or more dollars, he definitely has it. But what's weird about B? You know, did anything make you hesitate about B or anything strange there? Yeah. It looks so different, like at least $1. Like if this said Joe has at least $75, I think we might be easier to sort of see, but it looks so far away from the information we're given. And this is something you're going to see come back as we do more and more of these inference questions. Answers that are totally provably true when we think about them, but that at first glance look really different from what's in the passage. And that's why these are so tricky, because we can't just sort of do a quick, does it look like the passage? Yeah, sort of, okay. We have to be really certain. Super sneaky. B is correct. D was also super popular, and it's also a really interesting trap that we all fall into in inference, so worth talking about. I know that Joe can buy the shoes, but what's problematic about D? Is D not right? Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And so this is also a trap to be really alert to in inference questions where it's close but takes it too far into things that are too extreme. Yep. Yeah. It's D, I think, is also one of those sort of real world inferences. Like, yeah, that seems a likely thing that he might do, but we don't know for certain that he will. Cool. So we're gonna start with sort of, we'll do a couple more small questions, and then we're gonna build our way up into more and more complicated stuff as we go. So infer means to prove. It might look different at first glance. And we want to watch out for things that are reasonable or possible, but not certain. And for things that are close but too extreme. Those are two of the really, really common traps. They're going to keep coming back as questions get harder and harder. So now let's try this one. We have a little bit more information. We have a question, but we're only going to have 2 answers. So take a moment. I'll give you guys a minute or so. Read this mini passage, read this question, chat me when you have an answer. All right. If you haven't yet, chat me your answer. Okay. B was very popular. That was a popular answer, but also some folks said A. We had a mix. Because B was so popular, I'm going to ask some of the people who voted for B, could you make a case for why you didn't pick A? And in a minute, I'm going to make folks make a case for why we shouldn't pick B. But to start with, who wants to, everyone chat in. Anything to note that put you off answer A? Yeah. Really nice points, guys. Yeah, I was asking folks to explain or to sort of make a case for why A wouldn't work. And I think a couple of the responses only went to me, so I just want to read them. Eliminated A because there could have been another event that prompted the development of color management. That phrase would not have been developed. Also, another way of saying the same thing, color management science could have been developed for reasons outside of the automotive industry. Yeah, we're seeing a very similar type of trap here. We're seeing, okay, something that is possible, not 100% true. Whereas B, anyone have reservations about B? It does say that it developed in response to that need, yes. But does that mean that's the only need for this that could have ever arisen? Like, if the automotive industry hadn't needed this, could another industry have come along that needed the same thing? I think that's another way of saying what folks are trying to get at. Abib, does that make sense? Like, definitely seems less, might have taken longer for color management science to develop. Yeah. And that's why these are so sneaky, because it's close, but it's just a little too far, and we need something that's totally certain. Whereas with B, it was difficult to do this. That's a weaker statement. Like, it's not saying people couldn't have done it or it never happened or would never happen, but it's just saying it was difficult. It's hedging its bets a little. And that's often what we're looking for in a right answer, something that moves away from those very definitive extreme statements. There's another sort of variation in inference question that I want to look at. We've seen so far things that are using that language infer just. We're also going to get some questions that look, this is a simplified version, but that look like this. And this is the logic inference that I was mentioning earlier. Very, very similar task, looking for something that we can 100% prove for sure. But the questions might look more like this. So you'll see that if true, don't worry too much about it. It's just saying these things are true. These things are facts. Take them as true. Which of these other facts could I then prove if I knew these facts? So very similar to inference questions, same task, like here are these facts. What else can you prove? It's just the phrasing of the question is a little bit different. So I wanted to look at an example of that. Which of these could I prove if I know that revenues at company X rose last year, but profits fell sharply? A vote for C. Some votes for C with a question mark, some votes for B. All right, let's talk about it. I like the C question mark. Popular, but maybe uncertain. Nobody liked A. That's so extreme. It's also making a statement about the future. We don't know what exactly is going to happen in the future. We can never be certain about that. So as soon as you see will, you're like, probably not a good answer. And unprofitable, again, super extreme. Will be unprofitable, super definitive. Does this have to be true? B. Is there another thing that could have happened that produced this result? That profits fell. My question, maybe it wasn't clear, was just, does B have to be true for these statements up here to be true? Is this the only thing? Yeah, it's not our only scenario. We could have, they pursued sales but didn't get them, or something else catastrophic happened. There's lots of other reasons for this. So this isn't our only possible explanation. We can get rid of this. And then if we look at C, well, we're left with C. So even if you see the word percent and you're like, I hate percents, I don't get what this is saying, this is super confusing, don't worry, we really definitively eliminated A and B. And so that's the final thing to keep in mind before we go into some sort of full GRE-like questions is look for wrongs. Eliminate. And we're seeing the typical things to eliminate, sort of too extreme, too definitive. Just can't prove based on the passage. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to give you a short passage. And I want you I'll give you a couple minutes to read it. And then share in the chat. And if you don't mind chatting to all panelists and attendees for this one, because I think you guys will have interesting things for one another to look at. What are the real world inferences someone might make after reading this passage? And what's a GRE legal inference, if you can think of one? All right, here you go. Those are your two questions. What are the real world inferences someone might make reading these facts? What's a GRE legal inference? I'll give you a couple minutes to read it over, think about it, share in the chat. All right, I love these real world influences. These are so great. So to sum up, US companies have no stem cell scientists. Too extreme, right? We could still have some, even if a bunch have left. Another one would be scientists will come back to the US if they lift restriction. And that's that kind of future statement. We have no idea what will happen in the future. This maybe seems likely, but we can't prove it. Another really good real one, the US doesn't want scientists leaving. Also a great real world inference, right? We could say, oh, if Congress is thinking about lifting this ban, maybe it's because they're pissed scientists left and they want them to come back. Totally plausible, not workable on the GRE, where we need to go beyond plausible to what's provable. Did anyone think of a really good GRE legal inference? Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to do here. You know, yeah, I think it's hard to predict, but I think once we get to the answer choices, it's going to be super helpful that we predicted all these types of things that might be wrong. because then we're going to be able to eliminate some wrong answers. We have a sense of what's outside the scope of this argument. That process of elimination will help us get there. So we're going to answer an inference question. Which statement can be inferred? And I want to go through these answers together. I want to kind of walk through this one as a team, and then I'll turn you guys loose more on the next one. So let's start with A. Some foreign companies that conduct stem cell research work under fewer restrictions than US companies do. Anything immediately wrong with this? Anyone have a strong wrong, right reaction? All right, I'm gonna leave it in. I'll put a pin in it, see what else is here. B. Oh yeah, doesn't say anything about other companies, other countries. Cool. I'll flag that as a problem. Let's look at B. Because US scientists are under long-term contracts to foreign companies, there will be a significant influx of foreign professionals into the US. Anything wrong with that? Foreign professionals is actually in and of itself okay. Yeah. Yep. It's the will be. It's that future statement that there's a big issue here. Don't know what's going to be. All right. In the remaining 3 answers that we haven't looked at yet, any other examples of claims about the future that we cannot justify because they're happening in the future? We can't prove they're going to happen. Oh yeah, Sadie. US companies will no longer be at the forefront. Maybe, could be, but we don't know for certain that's going to happen. Cool. Any others that are making sort of claims about the future that we can't support? I definitely agree. C is also making a claim that we can't support in all parts of the world. You know, this passage is just telling us about the US. We do have some foreign companies involved, but all parts of the world. That's a huge overstatement. Yeah. And we also have a future statement as well. So B, C, D, and E, super strong reasons to get rid of them. A, we initially had some, didn't love it, had some concerns, but that actually ends up being a right answer once I see that the others are so much worse. So if you read an answer and your response is like, I don't know, keep it in, see what else is there that you can make a strong case for. Let's talk a little bit about why A is right. Some foreign companies that conduct stem cell research work under fewer restrictions than some US companies do. So we know in this passage that the US has intense restrictions, so US scientists go abroad. Now, if all other countries had the same restrictions, US scientists wouldn't go abroad. So actually, if I know those 2 facts, I do know for sure that some foreign companies have fewer restrictions. And the key words in this answer choice that make it a reasonable answer choice are some foreign companies, some US companies. I can feel pretty close to certain that's true based on this passage, especially because that language and fewer restrictions, like not, a ton fewer, not none, but just fewer restrictions. So that super wishy-washy language keeps answer A within this realm of legal inference. Also totally makes sense to get there by process of elimination. See what else is going on. All right. Anyone got questions before we do another one? Another one of these kind of logic type inferences. All right, I'm going to let you guys try this next one on your own, but I want to force you to follow a little bit of a process with it. And I'm going to outline the process for you, and then you're going to try it out on this question. Because I find having a consistent process for every question type is really helpful. So the first thing you're going to do is read the short passage. You know this is an inference question. In real life, you would look at the question stem first to make sure that that was true, then go read the passage, but I ordered the slide this way. So you're going to read the passage. I want you to ID what's a sort of real world trap inference. Can you ID what's a GRE legal inference? Just spend a moment thinking about that. Then I want you to go to the answer choices and try process of elimination. One thing that really helps me in process of elimination, because I rush a lot, that's a huge problem I have in life and on this test, is I write down A, B, C, D, E. And then after I read each answer choice, I'll do this. So if you think you might be tempted to not think about all 5 answer choices fully, do that. So read the short passage, spend a little time thinking about it, making some predictions. I'm going to give you about 1.5 minutes just to read and think about the passage. Then I'll put up the question itself and give you another 1.5 minutes to work on answering it. So I'm going to force you to start by unpacking and predicting. Then I'm going to give you the question. Here you go. All right, now here are the answer choices. I lost my bar. There you go. Here's the answer choices. So go ahead, take some time to consider, and then chat when you have an answer. Right. Everyone chat me if you had to pick one. What would you pick? And you can chat just to all panelists for this one. If you don't feel comfortable with other folks seeing your answer, that's totally fine. But chat something. I'm curious what everyone's thinking. You know, running low on time on the test, sometimes we have to just guess and move on. What would you guess here? Cool. All right, we're pretty torn between B and C. Let's quickly look at A, D, and E. What's wrong with A? Someone in the chat. Why is A wrong? Yeah. Yeah, not sure. Cool. What's wrong with D? Yeah. Could result, maybe, but will result? That already seems unlikely. Yeah. Even if I'm really shaky on what the actual relationships between things here, this will result seems way too strong. Awesome. So let's go back and just quickly take a look. Let's diagram what's going on in this passage so that we feel super clear, and then hopefully that'll help us decide between B and C. So first sentence, reducing government spending has been demonstrated to raise the value of a currency. Cool. So when I go down government spending, then I go up currency. All right. However, many economists no longer recommend this policy, so econ don't like it. A currency of lesser value, so that cheap currency causes exports to be more competitive. Cool. Okay. So now let's think about B. Reducing government spending. Okay. So that's this, reducing government spending. Well, if I reduce government spending, what happens? Well, I increase the value of a currency. And if I increase the value of the currency down here, if I took the opposite of that, the exports would get less competitive. So I start with this fact, and then I say, okay, I know this is true. If this is true, the flip of it also has to be true. So reducing government spending can, and note that key can there, not will or definitely, but can make a country's exports less competitive. B is really good. B ends up being right. C. What's wrong with C? Because C is so tempting. And it was very, very popular here. Not surprisingly, because figuring out B takes a moment. It's kind of weird. But what's wrong with C? Yeah. Yep. They no longer recommend this policy. But the B doesn't tell us what they actually do recommend. Maybe they recommend keeping it same level. Yeah. We don't know. Awesome. We're getting, that one was tricky. I'm gonna have some tricks to it. B ends up being our right answer. So before we go on, we're gonna do at least one or two more questions, I hope, but just want to recap. Inference questions. First, read the question stem. You know, if you see it's an inference. make a note. Then read the passage, looking for what you can prove. Not specifically, and also maybe thinking about what those real world inferences would be. As long as you remember that they're traps. Then go through the answers. Use process of elimination. Look for wrongs. Okay. Let's go on and do something a little different. So up to this point, we've seen really short, small passages. That's one question. And we're thinking about kind of everything in that little passage because it's so short. But I want to look now at a passage that's a little bit longer, where instead of having to think about the passage as a whole, we're going to be asked about specific details within the passage. And I also want to then use this as an opportunity to talk about what do we do when we have multiple questions on a passage. So here's an example of a slightly longer passage and 3 question stems associated with these passages. They're all inference questions. One thing that I sometimes do when I get a passage with multiple questions is I'd actually start by previewing the question stems just like this. So I'd take a moment and I'd look at them and think about what types of questions do I have here? And I'd see, okay, can be inferred, that's inference. Most likely mentions, that's also inference. Can be inferred, that's inference. What types of questions? And I might also make a brief note about what they're asking, like polar ice caps are being mentioned, planet, characteristics of a planet that support life. I'm going to look for those things. So I start by looking at the questions, and that gives me a framework for going back to read the passage. So here are 3 questions. We probably won't get to them all together tonight, but we'll do some of them. But to start, I want to give you 2 minutes to read this passage, keeping in mind that these are the questions you're going to be asked to answer. Maggie, that's a great question. I'm actually going to answer your question before we do this. If it's one question associated with it, like those really short ones we just did, then definitely completely read the passage. With multiple questions, I often preview the questions like this first because it may allow me to read less of the passage. Because this is going to ask me for inferences just about little specific details within the passage. So I take a look at the questions and I kind of use those to skim. But I do read super closely if it's just the one question associated. All right, take a minute or so to read, and then we'll look at the first question here. All right, let's take a look at this first question. No worries if you don't feel like you've fully read this passage as fully as you would like. That's often not the feeling we have anyway on the GRE. And we'll have more time to look at it as we get into the question. So here's our first question. Each of the following can be inferred from the passage except. So here's something that's a little bit different. We have except. And when we see this, we know we're dealing with a question that's going to be a little bit trickier because it's essentially saying, okay, 4 correct answers are legal inferences. 1 is not. And that one that is not an allowable inference or that is not in the passage is going to be our right answer. But it means as we look at each answer choice, we're going to think, okay, can I prove this using the passage? If you can't, might be the right answer. So here we go. Let's start with A. The presence of certain geological landforms is not definitive proof that there was once life on Mars. Take a moment, look at the passage. Anyone see any text that we could use to prove A was true? Okay, if we're unsure about A, let's move on. Let's look at B. B says similarities to Earth bolster the idea that a planet might have been capable of, might be or have been capable of supporting life. Anything in the passage that we could use to support that? To say, yeah, that seems like a legal inference. Oh yeah, I have something useful here. It says, okay, these findings substantially bolster claims. That's going to be useful, I think. I don't know if it's specifically useful yet to B, because these findings are definitely telling us the sort of results of the probes here, but it doesn't get into similarities to Earth. But we do have similarities of Earth up here in relationship to why scientists have long thought Mars might have life. So is definitely in there. We can support B, which means we can get rid of it. Chris, I'm not sure I follow what you're asking. Oh, we haven't said anything for sure about A yet. We were just looking at B. No one had anything to say pro or con to A, so I was like, let's put a pin in it. Let's keep going and look at the others. We're going to circle back to A. What about C? The absence of a global magnetic field suggests anything that supports C. Is that in the passage? Anyone find anything that supports that? Yeah. You can kind of do some word searching here when you get something like this. A substantial global magnetic field. Do I see that phrase? Yeah. Okay. So what does it say about it? Well, it says that Mars no longer possessed it. That eliminated Mars's atmosphere. This is all kind of in this part of the passage where it's talking about reasons why Mars might not have life. So it does definitely seem true that this lacking this magnetic field suggests not that there is no life, but that it would be difficult. So that seems like a legal inference. Let's get rid of it. D, the presence of water activity on Mars is related to the possibility of life on Mars. More recent probes investigated. Liquid water. Yeah, liquid water seems definitely relevant to this whole passage that's dealing with possibility of life on Mars. So that's a legal inference too. Okay, last one before we circle back to A. The claim that there was once water on Mars has only marginal support from recent discoveries. Is this a legal inference according to the passage? What do you guys think? Last question of the day. Almost there. Yeah, why not? Yeah. If anything, the opposite is true. You know, they have discovered some evidence of past water activity. So it's definitely not marginal support. That one is not an allowable inference. So we feel clear about that. We feel good about that. So that's going to be our right answer. A, we ultimately don't need to reconsider. So sometimes we don't know how to evaluate an answer, put in a pin in it, see what else is there, and then ultimately we don't have to deal with it, or we eliminate everything else and then we feel good it was right. But the key thing here is just if you're stuck on one answer choice or one part of a passage, keep moving, see where you can go if you go a little further. Often that'll make it easier when you circle back. All right. I, as always, was overambitious in what it is possible to do in an hour. So we're going to wrap up there, and I'm sorry we don't have time to do the 2 remaining questions on that passage. It is, however, in the 5-pound book in the reading comp chapter. One thing before we go, a really good thing to do at the end of every study session, it will help you improve faster, is just recap for yourself what are the sort of big lessons, takeaways, things you want to remember from that session. So if you all are up for it, share with all panelists and attendees, chat to everyone, what's one thing you learned about inference questions today? Maybe we can put together a useful list. Yes, watch for extremes and strong answers. Overly definitive answers. Yes, look for proof. So important. Have to be certain. The right answer can be proved. Watch out for plausible, reasonable, but not true. Use process of elimination. Cool. Those are basically the 4 really most important things to keep in mind when answering inference questions. I love it. If you can do those 4 things, you will be well on your way to conquering what is a super, super tricky type of reading comp question. Okay. Sorry, just someone had a response that I thought was funny. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Sorry to go a little over. I think we got started a little slow. If you are looking for other free things, on our YouTube channel, we post past free prep hours. So there's tons of stuff on there that you can take a look at. There's a lot of math stuff. There's more reading stuff. There's, I think, at least one other session that deals with inference questions in particular. You can also always take the first session of our full course for free, either online or in person if you live in a place where we have in-person classes. So good luck to everyone in your test prep journeys. My hope for all of you is you get the score you want as soon as possible and can be done with this and go on to more fun things.